carbon dioxide. And if we see the transition to the cold phase of the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, and it has the impacts that I think it will, this will cause a rethink. So, the next decade will be an interesting one as we see, wind and solar collapsing because it's just not a viable solution. Um, and, governments, people, I mean, elections. I mean, we've seen Argentina and the Netherlands,
Yeah.
with the people, when you have a democratic country, people just don't like this. They see what's happening.
Yeah, because I
I,
mean, yeah, because when you go to the extreme, you're being asked basically to become extraordinarily poorer in order to reach these targets, which is unworkable. But on the other side, then, if you want to look at linkages, we see with the World Health Organization proposed treaty 2024, they're now building in climate change as one of the things that they can get involved in, and the director general can declare a health emergency without referring to member countries. There seems to be a connection there. The World Economic Forum, those old pals of ours in that meet in Davos every year, they're saying now that the major issue of their top three issues over the next 10 years is climate change failure. And meanwhile, the UN and the EU are talking about digital IDs, and the Bank for International Settlements, through the central banks, are talking about bringing in, our advanced stages of bringing in digital currency. So you can see how all this could link up between your controls programmable spending through your digital wallet and the capacity of these non-elected transnational institutions just taking over the running of the planet as they see it themselves and imposing their will on the human population. That's it. Like that was the stuff of conspiracy theories some years ago, and it all just seems to be clicking into places.
Yeah, this whole idea of non-governmental world control, it goes back to the foundings of the UN. And I just read a fascinating PhD thesis, which really traces it back to the Rockefellers in the 1950s, who saw the climate and environmental issues and health as the two big pathways for this non-governmental world control. And this is playing out in very unfortunate ways. But in the U.S., the population is pretty evenly divided
Mm,
between people who support the more European worldview and people who are, completely against it.
yeah.
And so, we oscillate every 4 years between, administrations, one direction and the other. So it's a much harder thing to pull off in the US than it is in Europe, because we have a strong thread of,
Mm.
I shall say, dissidents in the US.
If you leave aside the politics of it for a minute, and even the economics of it, because if the economics of it fails, I mean, we're gonna have to change anyway. But what's very hopeful about your book, I think it's optimistic in terms of it's looked through to the end of this century and saying, look, we're fine. Yeah, there's a bit of warming going on, but we're coming out of a very cold period from 150 years ago, and there's no, and you're making quite clear about it. There is no theoretical science that links human CO2 emissions to global warming as being the culpable cause of it. It just doesn't stack up. That the system itself is quite chaotic and requires a completely different discipline in order to understand it. You're actually showing the way for us to move forward to actually get a grip with understanding the climate, and I think that's what makes your voice fascinating. Judy, if you don't mind me saying it, it's actually saying, look, this is the way forward. Follow me, follow the light. You know.
Well, it's not so much, setting myself up,
Mm,
as some sort of oracle. It's about trying to open our minds to think more broadly about the issue and to
mm,
consider this in a broader way, and to allow more voices, into the deliberations about how we should deal with this. We need to get rid of the simplistic, excuse me, the simplistic solutions, the precautionary principle that just doesn't work for these complex, wicked problems, and figure out how to carve this up into bite-sized, human-sized problems that we can actually deal with and make progress on.
Well, with my understanding, for what it's worth of economic linkages, it's going to take some time before the big ship turns around, before the trillions that have gone into this kind of, cyclops view of climate is going to admit that this isn't working, and population wakes up to realize that this is simply programming, and it's not working. The reality is different. But in the meantime, we're unfortunately we're burdened with linking everything now to climate change. In economic downturn, even the health system, climate change, and any kind of extreme weather events, which have become less common over the century than they had been before. It's extraordinary that it's now linked to any kind of weather event is climate change.
Well, this gives the decision makers an out rather than blaming on this on poor decisions, poor policies, poor governance. They just go, it's climate change, you know, and it gives them an out for making bad decisions.
Yeah, so when I think there was an example in your book when the water dried up and major waterway in Africa dried up, climate change was blamed, but actually it was just bad planning, infrastructure.
They were overusing the resources and managing it inappropriately.
Yeah. So I think that's underlining the point then about this transdisciplinary approach, where the engineers become a very important part of the annual reports that are done about how we're actually, what's the scorecard really like when it comes to dealing with what is modest levels of global warming. But look, Professor Judith Curry, I just want to thank you so much for coming to talk to Counterpoint. We're going to get this out into an Irish audience. I'll heartily recommend your book. Mine is pretty dog-eared now. It looks as if it's about 10 years old. I've been through it so many times. How are the book sales going for you on it?
Oh, I'm very pleased. It was recently translated into German, so now exploring. I've been doing a lot of podcasts in
Good.
Germany lately, but yeah, I'm very pleased by how it's been selling and about the response and just the communications that I get, people emailing me and
Mm,
stuff like that. I'm just really enjoying discussing the book with a broad range of people, and people take away different things from it.
mm.
That they're struck, by different parts of the book, which is, depends on where they're coming from in their own head and worldview. So I'm pleased that a broad range of people are buying this and responding to it and discussing it.
Well, I can heartily recommend it anyway. Climate Uncertainty and Risk: Rethinking Our Response by Professor Judith Curry. And my favourite saying, which I'll finish with, if I may again, because it absolutely just nails it, and it's Nietzsche: "He who fights with monsters might take care lest he thereby become a monster." So thank you very much for the interview, and I'll be commentating on this on social media and drawing attention to your book and saying, look, if you want to understand what's really going on, study this book.
Well, thank you, Ed. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Not at all. Thank you very much. Well, if you've enjoyed Counterpoint, please subscribe by clicking the button below. See you next time.